Welcome to the Sense Making in a Changing World podcast, where we explore the kind of thinking we need to navigate a positive way forward. I'm your host, Morag, permaculture educator and global ambassador, filmmaker, eco-villager, food forester, mother, practivist, and all-round lover of thinking, communicating, and acting regeneratively. For a long time, it's been clear to me that to shift trajectory to a thriving one planet way of life, we first need to shift our thinking. The way we perceive ourselves in relation to nature, self, and community is the core. So this is true now more than ever, and even the way change is changing. Unprecedented changes are happening all around us at a rapid pace. So how do we make sense of this? To know which way to turn, to know what action to focus on, so our efforts are worthwhile and nourishing and are working towards resilience, regeneration, and reconnection. What better way to make sense than to join together with others in open, generative conversation? In this podcast, I'll share conversations with my friends and colleagues, people who inspire and challenge me in their ways of thinking, connecting, and acting. These wonderful people are thinkers, doers, activists, scholars, writers, leaders, farmers, educators, people whose work informs permaculture and spark the imagination of what a post-COVID, climate-resilient, socially just future could look like. Their ideas and projects help us to make sense in this changing world, to compost and digest the ideas, and to nurture the fertile ground for new ideas, connections, and actions. Together, we'll open up conversations in the world of permaculture design, regenerative thinking, community action, earth repair, eco-literacy, and much more. I can't wait to share these conversations with you. Over the last 3 decades of personally making sense of the multiple crises we face, I always return to the practical and positive world of permaculture, with its ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share. I've seen firsthand how adaptable and responsive it can be in all contexts, from urban to rural, from refugee camps to suburbs. It helps people make sense of what's happening around them and to learn accessible design tools to shape their habitat positively and to contribute to cultural and ecological regeneration. This is why I've created the Permaculture Educators Program, to help thousands of people to become permaculture teachers everywhere through an interactive online dual certificate of permaculture design and teaching. We sponsor global perma-youth programs, women's self-help groups in the Global South, and teens in refugee camps. So anyway, this podcast is sponsored by the Permaculture Education Institute and our Permaculture Educators Program. If you'd like to find more about permaculture, I've created a 4-part permaculture video series to explain what permaculture is and also how you can make it your livelihood as well as your way of life. We'd love to invite you to join our wonderfully inspiring, friendly and supportive global learning community. So I welcome you to share each of these conversations, and I'd also like to suggest you create a local conversation circle to explore the ideas shared in each show and discuss together how this makes sense in your local community and environment. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I meet and speak with you today, the Gubbi Gubbi people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Have you ever wondered what it's like to live off-grid? Well, it's my delight to invite you to join my conversation today on Sense Making in a Changing World with Tao Wimbush, founder of the Lammas Ecovillage in Pembrokeshire, West Wales. This is the UK's first one-planet eco-village, featured in fact on Kenneth MacLeod's Grand Designs. Lammas is an off-grid permaculture village with grass-roofed homes. It's based on 150 acres of land or thereabouts, with 50 adults and numerous children. It's an amazing example of how to live lightly on the planet, and also a fabulous place of learning. Tao and I talk about the ideas behind One Planet development and how this village works and why people come there. He's the author of Birth of an Ecovillage, and he presented an internet TV series called Living in the Future. His background is in architecture and carpentry, and he's lived in a wide range of alternative communities, dwelled in tipis and yurts and roundhouses. But we also have a chance during this conversation to tour the house that he's crafted. It's beautiful. For only around £20,000, he says you can set up this kind of land-based living with your house and your land in places like West Wales using One Planet development. So he helps people do this kind of shift, transitioning to a land-based way of living through education and consulting, and he's an expert in One Planet development. I recorded this conversation when I was in Wales last year, and I'll release an extended version with tours of the landscape and the common spaces too on my YouTube channel at a later date. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoy this introduction to the Lammas Ecovillage and what One Planet living is all about. Hi, I'm Morag from our Permaculture Life and the Permaculture Education Institute. And I apologise for my voice. It seems to have disappeared somewhere in England, but I'm in Wales today, and I'm here at the Lammas Ecovillage with Tao. And Tao, what's your surname again?
Tao Wimbush.
Tao Wimbush, thank you.
Yeah.
Tao Wimbush has been here for 10 years at this eco-village, and it's a pioneering eco-village in many different ways. And so I'm really delighted to be here today with you to hear more about how this place got started and what it is, and also how it's been so influential in changing public policy around how eco-villages can form here in Wales.
Okay, so the Lammas Ecovillage started from a grassroots movement, putting pressure on local government to create a policy to enable people to move back to the land.
Brilliant.
And we began with 9 families, and in doing that was about the same time that we persuaded the government to scale up the One Planet development policy so that it covered the whole of Wales.
Can you just say a little bit about what the One Planet development policy is?
The One Planet development policy is radical in the UK because it enables people to live in the countryside. The UK planning system is based around the Town and Country Planning Act, and there's a philosophy that says people will live in the towns and the countryside shall be reserved for industrial agriculture.
Yes, right.
And so what the One Planet development policy does is it says, oh, no, it doesn't have to be that way. There's a place for people in the countryside so long as they're living sustainably, building with natural materials, and continuing to be productive with the land. Those are the 3 principles.
Yeah.
And so, we're kind of part of that movement. Yeah. And since the original 9 families came here, we've been joined by a whole load of peripheral families and plots. And the One Planet development policy across Wales has really scaled up. So, there are dozens and dozens of us now.
It really is quite radical, actually, isn't that what you're doing here?
Yeah.
I think, and we could do well with having something like this in Australia as well, because we have the same, it's called the urban footprint. Beyond that urban footprint that's described, nothing else can happen as well, except for industrial agriculture. Or if you happen to be a developer and have bought up the land 20, 30 years ago, and you might be able to sprawl out a suburb, but doesn't have the sustainability kind of agenda on that type of development. So I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Well, it came about, in the UK, it came about after the Second World War, and under a completely different set of parameters. At that time, the UK wanted to preserve its agricultural ability, and that was a time of plentiful and cheap fossil fuels. And so it kind of, it made sense. Let's put the people where we can service them easily. We can pipe in the food and the water and pipe out the waste, But it's a different age now.
Yeah, it is.
It's a different age and a different time. And this kind of concentrating people in towns and cities brings with it a whole load of problems.
It does. But I think also the other side of it is that there isn't an imagination of what is other to that until something like this. Yeah. Because the other image of what development is sprawl.
Yeah.
And we don't want that, so we stop.
Yeah.
And so an imagination to think up something completely different that can fit with maintaining the beautiful natural landscape, enhancing it, actually creating more forest space, creating more productive space, and creating greater levels of well-being. This makes sense in all those ways.
Yeah. And here in Wales, it particularly excels in these upland areas. We've got a lot of upland. Here we're 180 metres above sea level. Right, land that would be traditionally used only for grazing for sheep. Okay. Which is, as you know, a very inefficient way of growing food. And it's not very suited to large machines. And so, we come in, we bring in permaculture design, and we can rearrange the landscape so that, you know, instead of being one part of the farmer's income, you know, lamb being the cash crop, we produce a whole range of stuff. You know, we meet so many of our needs. Yeah.
So let's just tease that out a bit. So you're talking about permaculture design. So is permaculture underpinning this village? Do you see it as a permaculture village?
I do see it as a permaculture village. Yeah. I mean, my approach to permaculture is, you know, kind of, it's not so rational in a way. You know, my training as such was at Tipi Valley. And so I'm come from a roots perspective and a kind of practical perspective about, you know, the human relationship with the land base and with each other and with the world around us.
And you know what you've got. So what you've got here then is how many people and how many house lots and how much land are we working with here?
We are now about 120, 150 acres.
Right.
We're now approximately 15 households. Probably 50 adults plus kids. I don't like to be too firm about the red lines because
that's interesting.
Because you know, in many ways we are merging with local communities. You know, there are people who come and rent houses locally, so they can come and be
community.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. So, in terms of any kind of overall agreements about what you do together that defines that, then what defines your community? What would you think are some of the? Maybe it's about the way you work together, or is it about the kind of way that you live in the land? Or
I would say what defines our community is that pioneering spirit, that desire to explore what it is to live in harmony with the natural world, and the kind of space to do that, and the freedom to do that so that it can manifest in different ways.
So it's a little bit like we were talking earlier about, it's not about dropping out, it's actually dropping right in to explore different things and to as you say, emerge a new story about what it means to live well.
And it's interesting you say that. I mean, I've been quite privileged. I've lived in alternative communities a long time, and I've seen a lot of families drop out and then drop in, and that is a kind of process in itself that takes people time. You know, because you kind of like. Kind of got to unwind and re-educate yourself and create a space so that you can tune in and drop in.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you said that, because it's kind of, it's not an either or, it's an and, isn't it?
It is. I don't know, and people are motivated by different things. Some people move to this lifestyle to drop out. And some people move to this lifestyle to drop into something. But that process, I think, is a process that needs kind of respecting and honouring and recognising as something that, you know, takes quite a lot of time, you know, many years for most people, and you know, and is a thing in itself. You know, it's a rewiring.
It's true. It's true. So, on a very sort of practical level, how do you make decisions together? Do you, or are you more independent in your own plots? Like, what sort of level of community decision making or interaction or economy? Like, some places you've lived have been more communal, others sort of more independent. Where do you sit here in Lammas? How does that work?
I think on different levels it works in different ways. You know, in essence, we are fairly close to the conventional model of you have your plot, your territory, and within that territory you're autonomous, and the degree to which you interact with your community and the way in which you interact with your community is up to you. You know, there are formal structures that you can get involved with, and there are informal arrangements which you can get involved with, and people can define their interaction in their own way. Some people approach it from a free economy perspective. Some people have quite formal trade exchanges. some of the management is quite formalised. For example, the hydroelectric system needs quite a clear structure for its management, whereas other things are much more intuitive and fluid. For example, the celebration and the music and the cultural expression.
So there's two things that just popped out at me, which is actually more, but two things I wanted to pick up on. One was the hydroelectric, and one was a question about the commons here. So maybe let's start with the hydroelectric. So in a practical sense, you have a shared hydroelectric system?
Yeah. So on a practical sense, some of us have a shared
right.
So there is a hydroelectric system that serves the original 9 Tiragalva plots. And that's a kind of micro, medium scale hydro. Today it's running at 15 kilowatts, and then that's shared out amongst the households. But that does go up to 25 kilowatts when there's a lot of water.
And is that enough for your household needs?
It is enough because we kind of work backwards.
Oh, okay, right. Sure.
Yeah. So it's plenty.
Yeah.
From my perspective, we've got washing machine, fridge, freezer, teenagers. We use lots of it.
Haven't quite got that yet. Almost.
Laptops, stereos, power tools, etc.
Yeah, well, you're still building it too,
And hydro, by its very nature, is kind of dependent on the water flows in the landscape. And so most of us supplement that with solar.
Right, okay.
So that when there's periods of drought, we've got...
I can't imagine drought,
Yeah.
You have drought?
We had a drought last
No
year.
way.
Seriously, climate change.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. We had something like...
What's the sort of... Is drought something that people even... I wouldn't have thought there'd be a word for drought in Welsh. Maybe there's not.
I'm not sure there is in Welsh. No. We had 10 weeks of hot, dry weather, which for Wales is absolutely unheard of.
It's common for us, but not for here.
Yeah.
Because I hear that you kind of get... I've been watching little rainwater butts on the edges of houses thinking, what's the point of that? Such a tiny little thing. We've got 50,000 litres of water stored off the side of our buildings because we need to build in that resilience for long times of drought. So now you're starting to say you're experiencing this here.
Yeah, I mean, we approach water management in a kind of slightly different way. I mean, we have to design the landscape to be able to cope with deluge.
Yes, of course.
Is one of the things. We have to be able to cope with a lot of water in very short
What's your rainfall here?
On average, 1.6 metres a year.
It's about the same as ours, I think.
But that can vary quite a lot. I would say that could go up to 2.4, drop to 1.2.
Yeah. Okay.
But there are periods where it's just like buckets out the sky. So we have to kind of manage for that eventuality, and then we also have to manage for the dry periods. And if you've got polytunnels and greenhouses and things like that, so it's a kind of combination of kind of getting it to flow through the landscape quickly and storing
being able to slow it, store it when you need to. So how do you do that? Do you have like little stop gaps where when you want to store it, you can actually slow it down a bit? Like I remember in Ladakh, up in the Himalayas, they would have like little sections where they would stock it with old bits of cloth and mud and actually stop the water from moving. And then when they want to flow, they would open up and let it flow. Would you have that kind of thing, or is it just more...
Here it's more ponds.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So I'll show you our rainwater harvesting pond. We capture it in ponds. And then we can use those ponds for other things, biomass harvest, food crops, etc. And then we position them intelligently in the landscape so we can then use that water
to direct to your food producing areas. And so what about for your household use? What do you use for water?
So for drinking water, we share a spring, which is up in the valley, which is fantastic. And that provides our kind of domestic needs. For our livestock needs and for our horticultural needs, that's all rainwater harvest.
Brilliant. So the last question before maybe we go for a bit of a walkabout was about your commons. So you have your individual plots, but are there spaces where you have a common building, or common land and that sort of thing?
Yeah. We've got a community centre, we share trackways, we share footpaths, networks, we share a village green, we share bits of woodland. So
so how does that work? When you buy in, some money goes towards the community infrastructure management, development.
Kind of.
Right.
Yeah. Some of that initial money goes towards the commons.
Yeah.
With our community centre, we were blessed to get a grant from the UK government.
Gosh.
And so that's been a total blessing.
What happens in the community centre?
All sorts of things. We have kind of socials, which can be kind of pubs, music events. There's a regular choir there. There's a Christian group that kind of meets. Then there's meetings. It's also a venue for courses, Willowcraft, One Planet Living. We do family camps.
Right.
There's a certified kitchen in there, so we can value add to our produce. Right. And then there's also a little whole food shop. So
nice.
a whole
the
range
shop's
of
open
things.
all the time.
Yeah. So
how does that work? I would love Crystal Waters to have a shop open all the time, but even with 250 people, it doesn't seem like there's enough to keep it going, to have someone in the shop all the time.
Yeah, there's nobody mans it. It's self-service. It's just
well, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
There you go.
You
That's
go
all
in,
I need to do.
This is what you're buying, and then you write down in the book, you put the money in the tin.
Yeah, so it's just the whole foods, bulk foods that you order in together. Yeah. So you put in, you know what you all want, you buy it together. Yeah. All right, I'm going to start one of those when I get home, I think.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, very easy.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you for that. I think maybe we might sort of, if it's possible, just to go for a wander through and see what the houses and the commons and the various, particularly also the food systems that you've got going.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
So we're now inside Tao and Hoppy's house.
Yeah.
And this is, you obviously own built this house, natural building.
Yeah.
Tell us about what's going on. It's a beautiful house.
So very simple construction, stud wall construction, sheep's wool insulation.
Oh, wow.
We built it. It cost us £14,000 to build.
Oh, fantastic.
It's got 3 bedrooms.
Yeah.
It really works for us. It's very, very simple.
So let's go back to the price of things, because this is something that's a really big issue for a lot of young people around the world now, about just housing affordability. Homelessness of young people is just going through the roof. And even homelessness of, I want to say, in Australia, it's something like the women over 55. It's a growing level of homelessness because of the lack of affordability housing. So you're saying this is £14,000 to build this really beautiful home. And it's not a small home, it's lovely.
It's 90 square metres.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and then also the price of the land for about an acre here, you were saying, is how much in the Welsh uplands?
I would say averaging between £6,000 and £7,000 an acre for land in Wales.
So your house and your land in upland Wales, you're looking at about £20,000.
Yeah, I mean, generally, if someone's going to do a one planet development, I encourage people to have £30,000 behind them to start. Yeah. Bearing in mind that you need to buy really 3 acres minimum.
Yeah. For the agriculture.
In order to have enough land so that you can be productive, have a bit of income from it, grow some fuel, etc.
Yeah, okay.
And then bearing in mind you can borrow on top of that.
Yeah, right.
You can borrow against your land. We've spent £75,000 on our 7-acre plot over 10 years. Yeah. Putting in all the infrastructure, which is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but it's still affordable in the concept of, if you think about a standard house and a little piece of land in suburban Australia, people are spending $400,000 or $500,000. Yeah.
So, I think the average price of a house in the UK is now something like £230,000.
Yeah, that's about the same as Australia.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, so contextually, it's affordable, and it's still, you need some money behind it. You know.
So the access to land, there's lots of land that is available.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Lots of land across Wales.
Yeah.
More and more becoming available, especially with the Brexit stuff.
Yeah, right.
Which we don't need to go into.
No, it's not.
But yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've heard, looking at different models for how we house ourselves is a really interesting thing. I think it was in Italy or Spain, I wish I could remember now, they're saying that the government was actually paying young people to go and live in and restore village homes, out in the rural areas as a way to, one, house people restore, rural areas and bring back economic vitality into those areas. So there's so many different ways of doing it. It's really exciting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, under the One Planet Initiative, you could live in a caravan, you could live in a yurt, you can live in a teepee, you can live in a cabin, you could live in a cob house, you can live underground. It's kind of like you've got that freedom.
Great.
And in a way, that's the carrot. You can build your dream house, so long as you're living sustainably, being productive, and building naturally.
Which is really quite interesting, because I think, in a lot of other parts, it seems like there's so many restrictions on what you build and how you live. In terms of the housing stock, it has to be, a certain type, or the heritage restrictions, whereas here you're saying, as long as it's sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, you still have to meet the building codes, regulations. So if you're building a house rather than a caravan or a tent, it's got to have fire safety features. It's got to be robust. Et cetera, et cetera.
So what are the features that you've built into this house that you think are really interesting that you've done differently? I mean, I've noticed outside there's a sod roof outside. And talked about, wool insulation. Is that a common thing here? Because wool,
it's fairly common.
So I've noticed that you've got lots of wool producers around the hillsides.
I mean, the main thing about this house is that it was built to be quick.
Okay.
We were in a situation, we had young kids. We were living in caravans. We needed to put up accommodation very quickly. So simple stud walls, bosh, simple house shape. Get yourself into
a loop around. Let's see,
temporary accommodation.
This is beautiful.
Quickly and effectively. So that then you can kind of move on to the land and carry on and have some fun.
And where did you get the timber from and all that sort of?
So most of the timber is either from a local woodland or from our own woodland.
Yeah, great.
Mostly we milled it ourselves, so we get mobile sawmill in and mill it ourselves. The finish is plaster or lath.
What's
very simple? Like thin strips of wood.
Right.
Like offcuts. Milled into thin strips and then plastered over.
Yeah, great.
It's deliberately built off the ground. When we go outside, you'll see it's kind of on plinths, so that no matter what, it's always dry in here, which is important in Wales.
Because we have buildings up off the ground in Queensland, because we want the air to come under and cool our buildings.
Okay.
So you've got them up to stop the damp, because you were saying there's so much water here. So how do you keep it warm as well as dry?
So we've got there's a range behind us which we can cook on, and there's also wood burners.
Okay.
Yeah, and also we dump some of the electrical excess from the hydro as space heating.
Oh wow! Yeah. Okay, nice, very nice.
Yeah,
excellent.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful space. And so here is the lounge room, dining room, kitchen upstairs. You've got
one of our bedrooms upstairs,
one bedroom,
and then other bedrooms through there.
Yeah, gorgeous. Yeah. And so you handcrafted all these archways and
this is just kind of cheap brown wood. Just you use what you can. I mean, this has no commercial value. So,
but isn't it amazing? Something that has no commercial value actually looks like it is so much more beautiful. It's a shift, isn't it? In thinking about resources, and the same with like this beautiful. For me, this is a gorgeous archway. Yeah, so you probably did you pick something you thought, that's really nice shape?
Yeah, just a few roundwood features, just some natural wood. You know, we are, natural animals in a way. Yeah. So,
it kind of makes you feel more, comfortable in spaces that have natural form and natural shape, doesn't it? You don't feel so, you feel at ease.
Maybe we come from the forest. Maybe it's something deep.
Yeah. And sorry, I'm just going to show you washing. I hope you don't mind. But this is the washing line, the ladder. There we go. So as the heat rises, it dries the washing. Everything's stacked. It's a beautiful permaculture design here in your house. That's great. Good. Thank you so much. All right, we'll head on outside now.
So that's all for today. Thanks so much for joining us. Head on over to my YouTube channel, the link's below, and then you'll be able to watch this conversation, but also make sure that you subscribe, because that way you'll be notified of all new films that come out, and also the release of the extended tour of Lammas Ecovillage, where we go into the landscape and the common spaces too. And also you'll get notified of all the new all the new interviews and conversations that come out. So thanks again for joining us. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.